Welcome to Gettysburg National Military Park, famous for the 1922 United States Marine maneuvers. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only reason we're here.
It's the only reason we're here, so you're probably very confused on what I'm talking about. So, we preserve battlefields like Gettysburg as they serve as classrooms to more often not teach about our history, but sometimes we can also use them as classrooms for very different situations. And in the summer of 1922, 5,000 soldiers of the United States Marine Corps descended upon these fields to stage historical demonstrations of parts of the battle and also to show off their new equipment they had acquired as a result of the First World War. Why were they here at Gettysburg? Well, it was to save the Marine Corps from being cut. In this edition of Retracing History, we're going to explore why the United States Marine Corps was on the cutting table after the First World War, what compelled them to come to Gettysburg to try to save it, and you could probably guess they were successful, but how they achieved their success here on the battlefield of Gettysburg. For its first century and a half of existence, the United States of America were largely unsure what to do with its Marine Corps. While being a key component in protecting the United States' overseas interests, its actions were peripheral compared to those of the United States Army. Its prominence quickly changed with the onset of the Great War. Searching for experienced officers and soldiers, the Marine Corps was one of the few areas in the U.S. military where this could be found. The Leathernecks quickly became renowned for their success in the Western Theater, synonymous with battles like Belleau Wood and the Meuse-Argonne. Even General John Pershing, commander of the AEF, was impressed by how the Marines adapted to combat in Europe. However, this did not deter Pershing from advising President Warren Harding to make financial cuts of the Corps after the conflict. The rumors of the Leathernecks' partial or total dismantling did not sit well with their commandant, Major General John A. Lejeune. He treated this bureaucratic threat much like one on the battlefield, creating a counteroffensive that would seek to win public support in maintaining the Marine Corps in peacetime. The plan of attack? To stage tactical maneuvers upon famous battlefields of the American Civil War. The conflict, although 60 years old by this time, was still fresh in the minds of the average American. Tapping into the iconography of the war between the states was seen as the best way to appeal to the public. First of these maneuvers were conducted on the battlefield of the Wilderness in October of 1921, consisting of 4,000 Marines commanded by General Smedley Butler, famed two-time Medal of Honor recipient. The relative success of this first outing led to Lejeune and Butler planning a larger demonstration the following summer, one that would be far more accessible to the public than the Wilderness had been. This brings us to Gettysburg, where it was decided elements of the Marine Corps would conduct a week of activities to commemorate the anniversary of the famed battle, as well as Independence Day 1922. But this maneuver would not be a simple encampment for the public to gawk at. This would be a full-size mock campaign, seeing the Marines march through Pennsylvania and Maryland, where scenarios of threat may be sprung upon the column without warning. Butler was put in command of what became dubbed the East Coast Expeditionary Force, built from the highly decorated 5th and 6th Marine Regiments. Supporting them were elements of the Marine Aviation Wing, 10th Marine Artillery, and servicemen attached to the U.S. Navy's Atlantic Fleet. They departed Washington, D.C. on June 19th, encamping 5 times before reaching Gettysburg, Pennsylvania on June 26, 1922. Behind me is one of the most iconic monuments at Gettysburg, the State of Virginia Monument, or Robert E. Lee's monument. That's what it really is, let's be honest. But in the fields in front of the Virginia Monument, this is where the 5,000 Marines encamped during the week of June 26 through July 5th, 1922, encamped right out here. And it doesn't look like much today, just rolling fields, but it was a massive encampment. Again, 5,000 troops are camped out here. And in preparation for this, the Marine Corps had contracted local plumbers to tap into Gettysburg's water system and bring water out onto the battlefield. They had a couple bathhouses out here. They had 9 miles of telephone wires laid across Camp Harding, and they had radio contact set up between Gettysburg, Washington, D.C., Quantico, which is the Marines' barracks, New York, and Philadelphia. Now, it may not sound too impressive of today. This is 1922. You know, telephones are just becoming popular throughout the United States. Radio communication is in its infancy still. This is a big undertaking. This is a moving city that they set up shop right out here on the historic battlefield. Look like you have something to comment.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, so this is the camp. It's huge. Basically, the entire field, as far as you can see here, has just been tents. And then somewhere off in that vicinity would have been the airstrip for the air wing that was here as well. Yeah, the scale's kind of impressive. Once again, it looks significantly flatter in the photo than it does actually being out here, which is strange.
Well, it could be something that's said about when anybody studies Gettysburg and you see these soldiers moving back and forth and you're thinking, wait, why did Lee make a frontal assault across flat land? Well, as you're standing right here, that's Seminary Ridge where the monument is. You can see we're on a bit of a swell. There's a depression, another swell, depression. The Emmitsburg Road is on a swell, depression, and then Cemetery Ridge is over there.
It's basically just surfing along here.
Kind of.
Yeah.
So right after the First World War, the United States Marine Corps reorganized its aviation department. They were in a variety of different segments as needed during the conflict. It was time to unify their system. So there was one aviation wing of the Marine Corps. A portion of that wing were here for the 1922 maneuvers. Now, there is dispute over the exact number of equipment they brought with them, but we know of the 3 different components, which was the Vought VE-7s. They also brought with them how does the humble collector pronounce it? You are the 20th century. De Havilland, thank you very much. They brought a couple of their de Havilland's DH-4Bs, and they also brought with them the relatively new Martin bombers. And these were massive planes. The Martin bomber in particular, humble collector was just telling me, had a wingspan of almost 74 feet. They were huge.
I mean, you can see how big they are compared to the other planes.
Oh, yeah.
Which these are the de Havillands, then those would be the Voughts, and then the Martins. Yeah. That was the big draw for the show, was the Martins. Those were like brand new.
Yep. They were manufactured, I think, right after the war. Book says, I believe, 1920.
Yeah, beginning 1920.
Interesting note, those were used in the largest insurrection since the American Civil War, the West Virginia Mine Wars, culminating at the Battle of Blair Mountain. Though they weren't used in combat, they were sent down to provide basically support for the incident that was occurring down there. One of them tragically got lost in a storm and crashed into a West Virginia mountainside.
Yeah.
So they were very massive beasts. They were also very fragile beasts.
Yeah, I mean, it's all still wooden canvas at this point, so as we'll learn a bit about later. Is that right?
Really rough to pinpoint a lot of these locations due to the fact that the park has been thankfully restored as best they can to its 1863 appearance. Sadly, for us goofy enthusiasts, that means no 1922 vestiges.
No.
But noticing that this is a square, flat patch of ground, we're thinking that this is where, at the very least, the air wing that came with the encampment was parked. If you can see right there, that's what we're thinking this is. And the more I'm standing out here, the more I'm thinking it is, because you can see it's almost a perfect square.
Yep.
And this is almost a perfect square.
And we're kind of off at an angle from the monument like I would expect us to be.
That being said, on the next swell, you'll notice that it's also pretty well, looks like it's flat over there. We're going to go investigate that as well. But we feel that's a little too close to the encampment based upon the photograph. So right now I'm going with this is where at least the planes were parked, and maybe the airstrip was farther north out of view based on certain events that we're going to talk about later in the video. But we're going to do a loop around. We'll see if that's a possible candidate for where they parked the air wing.
So again, I'm probably crazy, but so there's a small tree there. Let's assume that there was a bigger tree there in 1922, got torn down, replanted, whatever. And then we have another clump of brush right there. And, I mean, the distance in between those two spots looks about right for there to be 3 planes parked wing to wing. Or is there 4 there? Yeah, 3. I mean, that's flatter than it is over here, honestly. At least it looks like it.
This is very flat. Well, as flat as you'll get in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, pretty much. And it makes sense, too, because it kind of juts off of where the main camp would be. And actually, I think the angle fits better from the monument. Going off. Yeah. Maybe.
Another possible candidate for where the airstrip and the planes for the United States Marine maneuvers in 1922 were parked. Possibly somewhere right in here. So, several hundred feet behind me to the south is the North Carolina Monument. And why that's important to the 1922 Marine maneuvers, as that is one of the guideposts in the Last of Fall book to locate the canvas White House. Now, we've been walking along Seminary Ridge for a little while now. We've tried the best we can to measure it out, and by measuring I mean using our smart devices. So it's a rough estimate. It has brought us to this site on Seminary Ridge, several hundred feet north of the North Carolina Monument, where in this rough area the canvas White House was established. So, considering this was going to be this event was designed to attract the attention of many of America's key individuals, that included the President of the United States. So, much like in the 1921 Wilderness Maneuvers, in 1922, President Harding was invited to view these demonstrations. Now, he was only planning to stay here one night, July 1st into July 2nd, 1922. That being said, the Marine Corps constructed one of the most interesting building projects I've ever seen an armed force in the United States do. What would you say, Connor?
Yeah, they built a very fancy tent for the president. It had like wood walls, wood floors, had bathrooms. It had wings off the side for male and female delegates and visitors and things. It's very cool. It doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but it was a beast. It was 400 feet long. I think it had room for like 30 people to spend the night there. Like
it was in a kind of in a half circle. So imagine a series of tents in a half circle, and then a flagpole at its center. You know, kind of like a roundabout, like you expect at a large estate. So you would have the United States flagpole. Cars would pull in, most either coming from the Emmitsburg Road or coming simply from Seminary Ridge, which is right behind me. You'd pull in, park, you would have a large central tent for the president and his first lady. You would have guest tents, you'd have free men guest tents, free women guest tents on either side, additional office space as well. And this thing wasn't just a tent, it was wooden walls, wooden flooring, they had wooden frames to hold up the canvas roof. And the Marines actually debated about painting it white, because, you know, White House, although they had difficulty getting it painted at times, so they did away with that idea. So somewhere in this general location, several hundred feet north of the North Carolina Monument, is where President Harding spent his night to view the 1922 maneuvers. And just down the road from here were another assortment of camps that were set up for the communications and for the VIPs that were coming to visit the encampment that week. All right, so we walked through Camp Harding, or where it was in late June, early July of 1922. Now, of course, this is base camp for the Marines, but they did a wide variety of activities during their week stay here in Gettysburg, so we're going to stop at just a few of those sites. So we are standing at the intersection of Culp Street and John Avenue in the middle of 2023 Gettysburg. Obviously in 1863, a lot of this development was not here, and right behind me is the upper end of Cemetery Ridge going into Cemetery Hill, and look at that beautiful car behind me. It's just pulling right behind me. We're keeping that in the shot, by the way. So if you're the owner of that car, you're now on Redoubt Productions. Anyways, we are standing at the intersection of Johns Avenue and Culp Street, and back in 1922, man, got some really good music going in there. Was it a Thunderbird? What was that? It was a beautiful car. It was a beautiful car. This is what happens when you come out and do retracing history. You don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes the history just rolls right up on your side. At this intersection, most of this was farm field, but during the week of the 1922 maneuvers, a circus came to town and set up in the open lot, roughly where the Gettysburg Heritage Center, is now standing. Unfortunately, this intersection is the scene of the most infamous event of the maneuvers. We mentioned earlier when we were at Camp Harding that one of the biggest attractions were the Marine Air Wing that came here to Gettysburg. Amongst those was a de Havilland bomber that was here, and it was under the command of Captain George W. Hamilton. Hamilton in 1922 was a big name in the United States Marine Corps. He had saw service in the First World War and actually, I believe, rode his way up to the rank of major, if I'm not mistaken. He was high-ranking before he resigned at the end of the Marines. There is a very famous photograph of the last night of the First World War that I'm sure I'm putting on display right now. He received numerous honors, was actually... Some people consider he should have been awarded the Medal of Honor. However, he never got that honor, but he got a variety of different awards. But he resigned from the military, but after a few years decided to return to the Marines, this time to take part in their new aviation wing. And he was a captain of a squadron of fighters and bombers that landed here at Gettysburg. Now, on June 26, 1922, in the second seat of that bomber was Gunnery Sergeant George R. Martin. Now, no, not George R. Martin. I know what you're thinking. George R. Martin was here. He did not see action in the First World War, but had several years under his belt in the Marines by 1922 and was well respected amongst the troops that arrived here at Gettysburg. Unfortunately, and for stuff that is still up to debate, we don't know what exactly caused it, their plane spun into a nosedive upon final approach to the airstrip at Camp Harding, and somewhere at this intersection is where Martin and Hamilton's plane spun into a nosedive, crashing right in front of the farmhouse right here, roughly where the Gettysburg Heritage Center now stands.
No, I was going to say, it was interesting what the author was saying, that one of the theories behind the crash is that the altimeter might have been off because it would have been set for Quantico, which is like 1,000 feet lower than here we are at Gettysburg. So that might have led him to think that he was further up than he was. I also thought it was interesting, they said that he probably could have pulled out of his dive, but basically if he had, he would have run right into the circus. So there is also the thought that he realized that he was going down and it was better to do it here in the street than actually hit the circus and possibly kill or wound a bunch of civilians. Which if that's the case, I mean, that's a pretty heroic way to go out, all things considered.
Hamilton was killed instantly. Martin was severely injured. Some hoped there was a chance for his survival. They put him in an ambulance to try to hurry him to the town's hospital, but he died upon arrival. This makes Hamilton and Martin the last two in-service deaths on the Gettysburg battlefield. It wouldn't be until a century later that any type of recognition was given to Martin and Hamilton's demise during the maneuvers. This was put together, I believe, in 2021 and was dedicated. And they actually had a small contingent of the United States Marine Corps do a service to dedicate this Wayside Marker. If you choose to visit it, to our knowledge, it is the only marker denoting the maneuvers at Gettysburg, which is why we're putting this video together, so you can have some type of guide to explore this very important event that happened on the Gettysburg battlefield, besides the battle itself. If you choose to visit the Wayside Marker, it is in the parking lot of the Gettysburg Heritage Center, and again, along Culp Street and John Avenue. Now, of course, the tactical of Pickett's charge was the biggest draw of these maneuvers, but there were other tacticals conducted around the Gettysburg area. One of those scenarios occurred on June 29th, 1922. Elements of the 5th Marine Regiment were surprised to discover that they're getting reports that the enemy was on their rear along West Confederate Avenue and had occupied Seminary Ridge. So the 5th Marine Regiment had to about face, drive the enemy off of Seminary Ridge, and then there would be fighting that occurred right here in this vicinity. We're along Willoughby Run. If you look behind me, this is McPherson's Ridge. So this would be the next ridge west of Seminary Ridge. The 5th Marine Regiment came out guns blazing. They brought all the equipment with them. They were laying telephone lines to be able to communicate back to their camps. They even had 2 chaplains along to record the dead of this tactical. They were successful in driving the enemy across Willoughby Run and then put them on Hare Ridge. And in fact, the Marines' air wing were actually doing reconnaissance as far as Cashtown. That's about 6 miles west of Gettysburg. And then the greatest enemy of the Marine Corps during these maneuvers occurred: rain. And it poured buckets, making them having to call off the maneuver till the next day. On June 30th, 1922, the 5th Marine Regiment completed its tactical, being able to assault and drive the enemy off of Hare Ridge. We're now standing on top of Seminary Ridge, which of course was the target of Confederate attacks on July 2nd and more famously July 3rd with Pickett's Charge. And in 1922, the Marines were going to do the same thing, because the main attraction on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1922 during the Marine maneuvers was a reenactment of Pickett's Charge. Now, this wasn't a reenactment that you're probably thinking of today, where everybody tries their best to be historically accurate to the period. They have the proper uniforms, proper equipment. The Marines were doing with what they had, which were Springfields. Me and Hummel Collector were debating on what they probably were equipped with.
Springfields. During World War I, a lot of U.S. troops, even though the Springfield was technically supposed to be our main rifle, they were equipped with 1917 Enfields because we were already producing them for the British. But yeah, by 1922, those have probably mostly been phased out, and probably Springfields have been here. Probably a couple Browning automatic rifles as well, I would say.
Yeah, so not smooth-bore muskets is what we're saying,
No.
or the single-shot rifled musket. The state-of-the-art technology coming right out of the First World War, hardware from the Great War. That's what the Marines were equipped with. So how are they going to do a historic reenactment? Well, they're going to organize into brigades, and they're actually going to march in brigade formations in lines of regiments across the fields, much like the Confederates did approximately 60 years before the maneuvers. Now, so the public can see what brigade is what, they all had large banners saying Garnett, Kemper, Armistead, marking divisions, Pickett, Trimble, Pettigrew, as they come across these fields. They also would simulate the artillery barrage that occurred at approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon on July 3rd. Now, they didn't use the Napoleons. They were using their 75 millimeters, and they actually had to line up on Seminary Ridge. So they had a score of 75 millimeter artillery pieces lined up on Seminary Ridge, pounding Cemetery Ridge over here. Must have been a deafening roar. A lot of people, when they talk about the Battle of Gettysburg, that artillery barrage historically, that was the loudest sound ever heard in the state of Pennsylvania. This had to have dwarfed the historic sound.
Oh, certainly. I mean, they said that they were hearing it, 13 miles away in Emmitsburg?
Oh, yeah. Like, this was a loud, terrific rumble. The 75 millimeters going off. It sounded like World War I had opened up here on the plains of Gettysburg. After the barrage, as it historically happened in 1863, the Marines step off in formations. They're going to march across. There would have been several hundred Marines lined up here along the stone wall near the copse of trees. And they would have done the best they can to simulate this famous attack. To note that they were Confederates, they tried to have as much tan as they could. They also had blanket rolls made just for this occasion to denote those are the Confederates. Small segments of the Confederate Marines were allowed to reach the angle over here, which we'll go visit momentarily. Interesting note, several of the Marine officers were representing key Confederate officials during the battle. The person to portray General Armistead, who famously led his brigade across the angle back there, was William Upshur. William Upshur was the son of a Confederate veteran, and he had received the Medal of Honor in Haiti in 1915. All right, so we are now standing in Zigglers Grove. And the reason we're out here, not too many people visit this part of the battlefield. And, well, part of the reason is you weren't able to visit this part of the battlefield in its historical setting until about 5 or 6 years ago. For many years, this was the site of the Cyclorama building. It's kind of hard to find the actual footprint today, but essentially would have been somewhere behind us where we're currently standing, where the famous Gettysburg Cyclorama was housed. And before that, in this rough area on this knoll here, there was an observation tower, one of the 5 observation towers that were built in the late 1890s to provide visitors an aerial perspective of the Battle of Gettysburg. Why are we here for the 1922 maneuvers? Well, this tower, or the tower that was on Zigglers Grove, is where President Harding, and the VIPs of the maneuvers watched the demonstrations. Now, in addition to the President and his First Lady being here for the July 1st demonstrations, on July 3rd, the widow of General James Longstreet was in attendance, and the grandson of George Pickett was in attendance. Pickett and Longstreet, their descendants were here on July 3rd, 1922 to see the historical demonstrations. There was also a military attaché that was encamped here during the week. They consisted represent about a dozen different nations, different armies here. One of the most interesting attachés here, would you like to provide a little context, Connor?
Yes, certainly. So, from one of these attachés, the one that stood most out to me was Captain Osami Nagano. Now, Nagano would later become the Combined Fleet Commander of the Japanese military and was instrumental in the decision to attack Pearl Harbor. Nagano would become a war criminal and would die awaiting trial in 1947 while in jail. But yeah, so Nagano, the guy who was one of the main drivers of the Pearl Harbor attack, was here in the U.S. in 1922 and attended the Marine Corps reenactment here, which is pretty crazy.
And likely, considering he's with the attaché, I would suspect the attaché would want to be up in the observation tower.
Oh, absolutely. He almost certainly would have been up there. He probably would have been walking these fields along with others. Like you said, they were from like a dozen different countries all over the world were attending this event.
In addition to Nagano being here, then Secretary of War Teddy Roosevelt Jr. was also here in attendance, also future Medal of Honor recipient during the Second World War. There were many different individuals that came to view this event. That's what we're trying to get across. Many different individuals. This was one of the largest peacetime military operations the United States had ever conducted.
Just think, you too could visit Gettysburg and walk in the footsteps of a Japanese war criminal. America.
Over 100,000 people came to Gettysburg that week in 1922 to see these maneuvers. And of course, we talk about President Harding being here, a military attaché being here. We talk about Medal of Honor recipients participating in this event. But there were a wide variety of Civil War veterans because they were very curious to see that the battleground they had hallowed, how and why it was being used by the Marines to do such a demonstration. Now, we don't have an exact number of how many Civil War veterans attended the 1922 maneuvers, but we do have some interesting tales, and probably the most interesting comes from the 12th New Jersey. The 12th New Jersey is a little history lesson. They were here, this is their monument behind me. They participated in actions involving the Bliss Farm, which is no longer standing out there because on July 3rd, 1863, men of the 12th New Jersey and a few other regiments decided to torch the building. It was becoming an impediment for both the Union and Confederates. Both sides were changing it over between skirmishers. Both were trying to use it as a sharpshooter's nest. So the Union decided on the morning of the 3rd, get rid of it, send some of the men of 12th New Jersey down and burn it. The 12th New Jersey were nicknamed the Buck and Ball Regiment because they sprayed a volley of buck and ball into the Bliss Farm to rid it of Confederate skirmishers. And you can see up on top of their monument, there is some buck and ball up there. But the reason we're talking about the 12th New Jersey with the 1922 Marine maneuvers is that there were 2 New Jersey veterans in the crowd during one of the demonstrations, the historical demonstrations. And they decided to get involved with the action. They actually hopped the line. They were headed down to the angle, and I don't know exactly where they fell into line. They came across a wounded Union Marine and asked them for their rifles, to which the Marines gave them their rifles, and the veterans participated in this historical demonstration of Pickett's charge. If that happened today, imagine the security nightmare that would result from it. But hey, it was 1922, and not only is this a different breed of soldiers because of the First World War, we're mixing World War I soldiers with Civil War soldiers. You gotta allow some leeway. They all went home unscathed. I wonder how because I don't think they would have. I wonder how well they were accustomed to those models of Springfields.
I'm sure those wooden Marines were probably sitting there like, now you gotta pull up the bolt, put your cartridge in there.
Oh, well, that wasn't going to stop these veterans of the 12th New Jersey. Now, the first 3 days of July of 1922 saw the Marines reenacting Pickett's charge as best as they could. I mean, they were working with Springfields or working with modern equipment, but they tried to keep in the proper formations. But what everybody was really here for was July 4th. On July 4th, 1922, it was no holds barred. It was going to be a mock battle of modern technology on the Gettysburg battlefield. We're complete with machine guns, with tanks, with air support. It's going to begin around 9 o'clock in the morning over there near Camp Harding. They actually brought 2 naval observation balloons with them, with the intention of destroying one of them for the public to see. So they raised those observation balloons, the Confederates do, and then Union air support flies over, in front of us, you can't see in the camera, flying over Cemetery Ridge, fly back to Seminary Ridge and shoot it down. And there was a big fireball because, what was in that balloon, Connor? Not helium. It was hydrogen. It was hydrogen. So there was a big explosion. Everyone ooh and ah.
There's some debate about whether or not something was actually in the balloon.
I'm going to say there wasn't, that they had a dummy in there. They had a dummy up there to make it look like somebody was observing, and then everybody saw the dummy flying out, which, considering what happened a few days ago with the plane crash, maybe not have been the best idea.
Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not. So the Confederate observation balloons have been taken down by the Union Marines, but don't worry, the Confederates are about to come out here with their machine guns. They're going to set up along the Emmitsburg Road. I think they also pump a load of smoke over this field, so they're able to move without the Union seeing them. They're not moving in lines of battle, guys. They're moving in small platoons. They're going in accession. You got one platoon moving forward and another platoon covering them. They keep moving forward like this. They're moving up to the Emmitsburg Road under the cover of smoke. Their major obstacle, however, is going to be the Cadore farmhouse, which was also a massive obstacle during the actual Battle of Gettysburg. That was the dividing line between Pickett's 3 different brigades as they assaulted Cemetery Ridge on July 3rd, 1863. But what the Union Marines had done, they kind of turned into a pillbox. They had a couple of machine gun nests up in there. They were pretty well armored up inside there. So, Connor, what did they have to call in?
So, probably one of the coolest things of the entire Marine Corps reenactment, in my opinion, is they brought in a small number of Confederate Renault tanks, which then assaulted the farmhouse from 2 directions and pumped high explosive shells through the windows. Obviously not really, but yeah, and actually the Marines did take out one of the tanks.
Yeah, the Union Marines were able to stop one of the Confederate tanks.
Yes.
But putting 4 tanks on the battlefield that's a lot against that brick farmhouse. You're probably gonna get wiped out.
Probably. And the Union didn't have any tank support that we were able to see.
No, it seems they only brought 4. They only brought 4 of the tanks with them. Interesting side note. Up to this, this would be, I think, the most number of tanks on the Gettysburg battlefield. You might be wondering why I'm mentioning this. Well, in 1918, that ground over there across the Emmitsburg Road, that was Camp Culp. Then Captain Dwight Eisenhower's first command in the Army, the first training ground for a tank corps in the United States military. How many tanks do they have?
They have 1 after a while.
Yeah, so the Marines had more tanks here for their maneuvers in 1922 in peacetime than Eisenhower did during the First World War.
Yep.
I don't know if that speaks about our country.
If you research these Marine maneuvers, you'll come across a cluster of photographs taken near the Cadore farmhouse. It's quite a surrealistic sight. Marines a few years removed from the Great War swarming around a monument commemorating the American Civil War. The marker in question is one of 3 on the Gettysburg battlefield dedicated to the 106th Pennsylvania Regiment. On July 2, 1863, they advanced onto the Cadore property to block the charge of a brigade of Georgians. The monument was originally placed on Cemetery Ridge in 1884 by veterans of the regiment, but was moved to its present-day location when the Pennsylvania government financed a larger monument in 1889.
Now, once the Cadore farmhouse was taken, the Confederates are going to move over the Emmitsburg Road, and as they advance towards Cemetery Ridge, the judges call off the assault, declaring it a Confederate victory. So there was no big breakthrough through the copse of trees as there was in 1863. Bummer.
Yeah, real bummer.
Bummer. Funny thing, aviation support and artillery will do a number on you.
Yeah.
No need for a grand assault.
No. Yeah, they already pretty much annihilated the Union positions. They had, I don't know, we know that there was skirmishing going on in the air too, but I don't know if they ever mentioned in the book who won the air duel. But, yeah, no, one heck of a show.
On July 5th, 1922, The Marines broke up their quarters at Camp Harding and prepared for their march back to D.C. For the Leathernecks, the week-long experience was an irritable one on account of the death of 2 of their members and the heavy rain had turned the fields of Gettysburg into lakes of mud. Their frustrations with the weather were made vocal through quacking at their commanders during a July 3rd tactical. Nevertheless, the spectacle had succeeded in drawing massive crowds. Lejeune would organize a third maneuver on the battlefield surrounding New Market, Virginia in 1923, securing both the support of the American public and federal government. In addition to sparing the Marine Corps from the financial chopping block, the maneuvers also had provided 3 years of experimentation in tactics and equipment that would come to assist the United States of America in future conflicts.
So, that is how Gettysburg was used to save the United States Marine Corps. What'd you think?
Oh, I had a great time. It was super interesting. We got to see some Confederate tanks attack a farm.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great. That it really happened.
It really did. This is a thing that actually happened.
just no casualties. Well, except those 2.
Yeah, two casualties.
Yeah, the last 2 in the line of duty deaths on the Gettysburg battlefield. So, hey, thank you guys for watching this edition of Retracing History. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to hit the like button down below to let the algorithm know history videos are important on YouTube. And then, if you want to subscribe to the channel to be the first notified when the next video comes out. If you want to go the extra mile and support me, there is a link in the description below for my Ko-fi page. Hey, thank you folks for watching. Be sure to support Redoubt Productions, support A Humble Collector, and we will see you in the next video.